good morning. And apologies, I know we're starting a little bit late. We'll make that up throughout the day, given some of our technical challenges this morning. But again, good morning, and Brian, thank you for the introduction and also starting us off this morning. And let me also extend my warm welcome to everyone to the PCAOB's second 2024 Forum for Auditors of Small Businesses and Broker-Dealers. It's wonderful. I think, I'm not sure, maybe people will come in later today, but at least from the registration, we were anticipating about 100 individuals from over 40 firms, which that level of interest is incredibly reassuring, because auditors of smaller companies or smaller firms serve a crucial role, as you all well know, in the financial reporting ecosystem. And as Brian said, the purpose of this, and we look forward to the exchange of ideas throughout the day. It's going to be a dialogue as we proceed. The opportunity really is for two-way dialogue. Throughout the day, you'll meet with, in various sessions, representatives from the PCAOB's Division of Registration and Inspections, the Office of the Chief Auditor, and the Division of Enforcement and Investigations. These are our technical experts at a staff level. These are the folks that live and breathe audit oversight, kind of boots on the ground, if you will. In addition, we're very fortunate to also have staff from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA, this afternoon, as well as a pre-recorded message from staff at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. All the presenters throughout the day, as I mentioned, will provide updates and provide examples of their work as we go through. But of most value is really the opportunity for us to engage directly with you. We designed today to be a discussion. It's not a lecture. This is not meant to be a lecture. As we go through this, it's really meant to be a discussion. We may not be able to, probably stating the obvious, to respond to every specific question that has a lot of specific facts and circumstances, but our overarching goal is to be as helpful and responsive to your questions and comments as possible. So that's our objective for the rest of the day. Brian already gave the disclaimer, but I'll just mention it quickly. Before I continue, please know that my remarks reflect my individual views as a board member and do not necessarily reflect those of my fellow board members, the full board, or PCAOB's excellent staff. I'm personally extremely excited to be here in person. I think it's great. I mean, the world is still getting back to normal, if you will, maybe a new normal, but it's really great to be here in person and having our second forum of the year here in the Los Angeles area. After today's event, as you may have read some of the press releases earlier, my fellow board members will be hosting 3 additional in-person forums in Denver, in Miami, and the New York metro area later this year. Some of you that have been involved for a long time in the PCAOB or in auditing certainly may recall for many years, from about 2004 through 2019, the PCAOB hosted small business and broker-dealer forums at various locations around the country each year. During a lot of that period, when I was a staff in our Division of Registration Inspections, I had the opportunity, the wonderful opportunity actually, to lead our inspection efforts of our non-affiliated or smaller firm inspections. During the time, one of the things I look forward to was forums such as this, and having the chance to present at several forums each year, and the opportunity to meet and to hear from individuals in attendance. I know I always benefited significantly actually from hearing your questions, your thoughts, even your concerns, to be quite honest, regarding our inspection work. And I view the forums as a key aspect of the PCAOB's outreach efforts. The value, and make no mistake, the value of the interaction is significant. It allowed me personally to develop a deep appreciation of the complexities facing auditors of smaller companies. And these insights that I gained over that period are still with me. And I think about those as I view the PCAOB's current activities now sitting here as a board member. I believe it's essential to not only consider, but also understand the unique and diverse nature of smaller firms as we contemplate new initiatives. The presenters and I will be here all day, so please feel free to ask us questions during sessions, during the breaks. That we want to be as helpful as we can. As Brian mentioned, at the end of the day, I'll come back up here and lead a brief, maybe 10 minutes or so, wrap-up session where if there's any remaining questions, that we didn't get to or couldn't get to, or if you have other questions, we're happy to take those at the end. And again, just to repeat myself, our goal is to make this a dialogue. And I encourage everyone to reach out. We also have mics, so if you want to raise your hand throughout, that's absolutely fine as well, besides using the technology. During my remarks here, my short remarks this morning, I do want to touch on a few areas, 3 areas to be exact. To start, I'd like to offer my perspective on the importance of the auditing profession to investors, the capital markets, society as a whole, with a specific focus on the importance of smaller firms. I'll then provide a brief overview of the PCAOB strategic plan and how it will be touched on throughout the day in the sessions. And then last, I'll share a few of my priorities as a board member. Then, when I'm done with the prepared remarks, we'll quickly move to a fireside chat, and then we'll open it up for your questions before the opening session here ends. As a certified public accountant, one of the 2 on the board, as you're probably aware, with Christina Ho, but as a certified public accountant and a former financial statement auditor, I constantly bear in mind the impact of our oversight on all firms, from the largest firms to the sole practitioner. To be clear, the large accounting firms are not the only voice in the profession. America's smaller firms and practitioners also make up a significant number of today's practicing CPAs and continue to do the profession proud. For the auditing profession to remain resilient, vibrant, and noble, smaller firms must continue to be healthy and able to perform high-quality audits. Former SEC Chairman Arthur Levitt may have actually said it best, and I quote, "Whether you're an accountant in a large firm or a sole practitioner in a small town, every public accountant in America has been handed the same precious franchise, granted its special privileges, and charged with its care," close quote. Small market capital companies, in many respects, are the engine of the U.S. economy. Smaller companies are often on the ground floor of new technologies and innovations. They're in vital industries like construction, healthcare, and financial services. In many instances, these companies are audited by smaller firms. A robust and active population of smaller firms is critical to serve these public companies and protect investors. In fact, small cap companies report the highest proportion of shares held by retail investors at an average of 23%. 45% of small cap companies report an increase in retail holdings over the past 12 months. The small practitioner helps to build businesses from the ground up. They establish the very bedrock on which today's emerging companies will one day grow into tomorrow's global leaders. Accordingly, it's clear that the smaller audit firms have a significant role to play in support of investors in the capital markets. The PCAOB cannot be overly focused on larger firms. We are the oversight body for all registered firms. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act makes that clear. As of December 31st, 2023, end of last year, there are approximately 400 non-affiliated U.S.-based firms actively auditing issuers or broker-dealers. While the role that the smaller firms serve is no less important than that of the larger firms, smaller firms do have unique and different attributes. These must be recognized and acknowledged. Such differences and challenges may include these things such as the use of and ability to invest in advanced technologies, access to talent due to the lower numbers of accounting students, greater use of outside specialists, audit partners and staff that may audit more private companies than public companies, consolidation of firms, and the growing trend of private equity investments in accounting firms and the resulting use of alternative practice structures in accounting firms. We recognize these challenges and the implications they have for your practices and keep them top of mind as we consider initiatives and potential standards and rules. The PCAOB's oversight activities of smaller firms is a significant component of what we do. As an example, over the past 3 years, our inspectors have inspected on average 142 annual and triennial non-affiliated U.S.-based firms. This average represents 88 firms that audit public companies and 54 firms that audit broker and dealers. That's on average. Collectively, these firm inspections include the review on average of 370 public company and broker-dealer audit engagements each year. As of the end of 2023, approximately 40% of all U.S. public companies domiciled in the U.S. are audited by U.S.-based smaller firms. These audits represent capitalization of almost $500 billion. So make no mistake, your work matters to the PCAOB, investors, and the capital markets. Our inspections, in addition to being necessary to ensure PCAOB is compliant with our inspection mandates as stated in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, these help the board and staff stay abreast of issues and challenges facing smaller firms. As you interact with us in the course of our inspection activities, I encourage you to talk with your PCAOB inspection teams assigned to ensure you understand their perspective on any noted deficiencies or possible deficiencies, engage early and in a comprehensive manner during the remediation process, consider providing comment letters to propose standards and rules, and finally, maybe most importantly actually, ensure your partners and staff are aware of our spotlight documents, including any related good practices noted. Please reach out to the staff when you have questions or concerns, or even the board if warranted. We value your views and perspectives. This year's forums are part of this process. Now, I'd like to shift and provide a summary of the PCAOB's 2022 to 2026 strategic plan and the areas that my colleagues will cover in more detail in later sessions. The strategic plan, which you're probably well aware of, sets the direction of the PCAOB's activities and has 4 primary focus areas, 3 of which are outward focused and 1 is internal focus. First is modernizing our standards. This goal ensures our existing auditing standards are modernized as needed and are fit for purpose to meet the expectations of investors now and into the future. Part of this exercise is finding the right equilibrium regarding which firms are subject to the rules and standards and what is required of them. For example, our recently proposed firm and engagement metrics are currently proposed to be limited to audits of accelerated and large accelerated filers. For recently adopted AS 1000, General Responsibilities of the Auditor Conducting an Audit, the release explains that the decision to shorten the timeline for documentation completion from 45 days to 14 days was made with potential challenges for smaller firms in mind. Some of our standards involve staggered start dates to allow smaller firms more time to update policies and procedures as necessary. We have a number of recently adopted standards to review with you today, and you'll hear more about them later this morning from my colleagues in the Office of the Chief Auditor. As we've moved closer to implementation of new rules and standards, we want to hear from you about what guidance will be most helpful. Next, enhanced inspections. Our inspection reports have more transparency, including a new section on auditor independence and a range of other improvements to make the reports more transparent, relevant, and useful. In general, I believe the more transparency the PCAOB can provide around our audit oversight activities and the data we collect, the more useful it will be to investors, auditors, audit committees, the academic community, and other stakeholders. We've been making great strides to issue our inspection reports in a more timely manner. In fact, the majority of our 2023 inspection reports have been issued. My colleagues in DRI will share some additional information on these points and other recent developments. Next is strengthening enforcement. There's been a lot of coverage regarding our recent enforcement activities, which you will hear more about just before lunch. In continuing our pursuit of quality audits, enforcement plays an important deterrent role. I want to emphasize that by law, all monetary penalties the PCAOB collects go directly towards scholarships to advance the auditing profession. They do not fund our operations in any way. Our 2024 scholarship recipients will be announced soon. Last year, nearly 70% of the recipients came from households with family incomes below $75,000. We continue to expand the number of academic institutions eligible to participate in the program to reach the largest possible pool of students. We recognize the talent shortages firms are facing, and through our scholarship program, we hope to remove at least some barriers for accounting students who otherwise might not enter the profession. Then last, the fourth area is to improve our organizational effectiveness. This is the internal focus. The last goal aims to ensure we are executing our mandate as effectively as possible. This includes interactions with key stakeholders and such things such as today's forum. So together, these initiatives are designed to allow the PCOB to meet the mission stated within the Act. Execution of these priorities will serve not to only benefit investors, but I feel strongly they will benefit the auditing profession. Now let me turn to a few of my priorities as a board member. These are those larger themes that I try to keep in mind while performing my duties as a board member. First is the need for increased transparency. As I alluded to earlier, over the past year, the PCOB has made substantial progress increasing the amount of information available in our inspection reports, in part with the inclusion of Part 1C on independence matters. We also have increased the usability of our website with new search features for firms and inspection reports. This is an area that will continue to be a focus going forward. Efforts at increasing transparency also include a renewed focus on critical audit matters, or CAMs. I'm pleased that CAMs is on our standard-setting research agenda. As you perform your audits, I encourage you to reconsider which matters meet the definition for reporting as CAMs. CAMs is an area of great interest of investors. It's important we get this right. While still in the proposal stage, the potential for firm engagement metrics, if adopted, would also increase transparency for investors and audit committees. Another of my priorities is firm culture, which I continue to believe plays an outsized role in driving consistent, high-quality audits. Firm culture includes tone at the top, the middle, and the lower levels, as well as those written and unwritten rules. DRI is in the midst of a firm culture initiative focused on larger firms. I'm very interested in their findings and what they may suggest for smaller firms. I also want to call your attention to SEC Chief Accountant Paul Munter's recent statement on fostering a healthy tone at the top at audit firms, focused on how messages from firm leadership can influence a firm's ability to perform quality audits. I encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to review that statement and reflect on the culture at your own firm. The last priority I'll touch on today is ensuring we hear from all stakeholders. We do so through measures such as careful consideration and review of all comment letters and the activities of our investor advisory group and our standards and emerging issues advisory group, which I should note, as you may be aware, has 2 representatives from smaller firms, as well as hosting, again, events such as this. The PCOB's outreach and engagement with all stakeholders will ensure we have the best information to arrive at the right answer. So let me conclude again by thanking everyone here, but I also want to thank Loyola Marymount University for providing this wonderful space and this wonderful campus for us to meet today. I'm grateful that there's a few professors, accounting professors participating, and I'm grateful for any conversations they may have throughout the day. Through your scholarly research and education of the next generation of accountants, the accounting academic community plays an indispensable role. Second, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your role in supporting investors in the capital markets. Smaller firms, their partners and staff are the backbone of the auditing profession. The work you perform is essential to a healthy and vibrant capital market. Teddy Roosevelt once said, and I quote, "Far and away, the best prize that life offers is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." The work you and your firms do each and every day is work worth doing. So thank you for your attention, and we will now shift. Ellen Graper will come up to the stage to a fireside chat, and then again, we'll open up to any questions you may have. So Ellen, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Graper. I'm George's advisor. For the last 15 years of my career, I've worked with small firms, both within the PCOB and outside of it, helping them navigate the inspection process, unfortunately in some cases the enforcement process, and also remediation. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you today.
And I would say, if I may, it's very important for me to have Ellen. We've known each other for years, but more importantly than that is she did a lot of work, as she just said, with small firms. So she brings a different perspective, a unique perspective that is invaluable as we think about initiatives, about rules. So I'm grateful for her perspective.
So I'll be asking George some questions. We'll have 4 CPE codes for this segment of questions. So the first one I want to share with you is 529, like your children's 529 plan. So we'll start with that and stay tuned for more. And I also want to put a plug in to the extent you have any questions for George. You can ask them through the Conference IO app, or you could stand up. We've got a small enough room. We're happy to be responsive to your questions. That's one of the reasons we're doing this today, and George is with us. So I'll start off with kind of lobbing you a softball to begin with. So as you mentioned, your background, and in Brian's introduction, you've been at the PCOB for a long time, but you've only been a board member for 7 months. So could you tell us a little bit about how the background, you alluded to this in your remarks, but how the background you have for being on the staff has informed the decisions you make on the board?
No, thank you for the question, and I appreciate that. Yeah, it always scares me when I say I've been at the PCB 20 years. That's just in case how old I am, and that's before not counting my time at the firm. But I think it does start with the firm. I take great pride in being a member of the profession. I take great pride in being a financial statement auditor. It's been a long time since I've done an actual audit, if you will, but I still think of myself as an auditor and even as an inspector when I first joined the PCOB. So it starts there, I think, Ellen. I will say, as I kind of advanced and had some very wonderful opportunities at the PCOB, and getting involved, overseeing, as I mentioned, the small firm program many years ago, and interacting with many of you in this room and around the country. And that's where I started to begin to fully appreciate. I mean, I knew there were differences, large firm, small firm, but when you hear it in person, you begin to recognize, okay, that's something different than what I thought it was. So that began to influence my thinking. And then I had the opportunity for about 3.5 years to work with then Chairman James Doty, and his staff. And that really focused my mind on the broader policy aspects that the PCOB brings, how audit impacts the capital markets, the allocation of capital, quite literally. I mean, I knew that's what the audit did, but I began to have a much deeper and greater appreciation. So that really influenced my thinking. And then being the director of DRI for those 5 or 5.5 years, and overseeing kind of all firms again, and that's where one has to really think about, you can't become overly focused on one side of the equation. You can't become overly focused on large firms, overly focused on small firms. You have to think more broadly about what inspections and oversight means. So I think the assimilation of all those experiences have come together to really kind of crystallize in my mind, first and foremost, and I'll pause after this, the value of the profession to society. I mean, as we've discussed a lot over the last several months, that in many respects, taken a bit to an extreme, if we didn't have a robust auditing profession made up of all firms, shapes, and sizes, our society, I don't think, works. The capital markets don't work. The liquidity, the trust that's being brought to the capital markets is foundational to how we live our lives, and it starts with the folks in this room. It starts with the academic community and the students. And that's how I kind of think about what we do and the important role that both the audit firms play in the space, the profession plays, even the regulators play in the space, to bring that level of trust that individuals are willing to put their hard-earned money in the capital markets, or companies or banks are willing to make investment decisions or allocation of capital decisions, fundamentally based on the premise that there's an audit that's an independent review of a company. That's helpful.
Thank you. There's a lot going on at the board level. I get the PCOB news alerts, and it seems like there's a lot of activity, and a lot of that is in our Office of Chief Accountant Auditor and the standard setting and rulemaking that's going on. So can you provide a little bit about what's driving all of this activity from a standard perspective at the board level?
Yeah, that's a great question. That comes up all the time, because there is a lot of activity. Make no mistake, there's a lot of activity, kind of unprecedented activity, particularly in the standard setting space. I think the way I think about it, when the board was formed in 2003, the board because there was no other option at the time, adopted the AICPA's rules as interim standards, again, as everyone's well aware. And then over the years has been adding to that, confirmations, sort of ICFR, et cetera. But now that we've been in existence for 20 plus years, those standards have just gotten older and older and older. And it's caused many folks to question, are they still fit for purpose? Do they need to be modernized? And I wouldn't sit here and suggest that every standard needs to be changed. I'm not suggesting that. But when you look at some of the confirmation standard, which was just more recently approved by the board, the existing talked about the fax machines, in fact, and things that isn't necessarily how business occurs. So it's not that it was bad, it just wasn't reflective. Time had moved on. And I think that has caused, by necessity, the board more broadly, certainly the Office of Chief Auditor, to consider, what else is out there that may need to be modified, updated to reflect reality today. So I think that's a lot of what you're seeing, is that view that there are standards that maybe in some cases may need to be changed a lot, other cases may just need to be more modernized to reflect how business is done. And in many cases, again, as you all know, firms have moved beyond the standards. So there are standards is maybe here, but firms are actually operating here because of technology or other tools or the way business is done, as I said. So I think that's what's driving a lot of, and last thing I would say that is certainly influencing it is investor needs. And what we hear from investors, what we hear from other stakeholders about, is the audit serving the purpose that they need it to serve? So I think it's a combination of the modernization, it's also a combination of technology driving changes, and then what investors are looking for, what they need. And key part of that, and I'll pause, is the comment period process. When we do propose a review, ultimately, we seek input from our advisory groups, but then there's a comment period. We need to seek that feedback to make sure, again, we get to the right answer ultimately.
Let me drill into the comment period, because from what I've seen, there are some small firms do provide comment letters to proposals, but in general, most of the responses aren't coming from small firms. Right. So what are some things you want to encourage people in this audience to think about in terms of our standard setting agenda and what role they play? Yeah,
that's a great point. I'm glad you raised it. I can't overstate the importance of the comment period process. I know it's very difficult. We try to give sufficient time. There's always a question, well, how much time does one provide? We get comments. It's almost the same question comes up from investors. Do investors always comment? Mm-hmm. And they don't always comment either at a retail investment level for various reasons. But I would absolutely encourage you, to the extent you can, to do your best to comment on the standards. We do need to hear from as many firms as possible, not just the major firms. And I recognize they have a lot of resources at their disposal, well more than other firms, and I don't want to minimize that. But I would encourage you, even if you don't respond on the whole thing, if there's pieces of it you can respond on and break it in chunks, that's fine as well. Because we do need to make sure we are thinking through. We do our best, I will say, working with our colleagues in the Chief Auditor's Office and inspections and enforcement, what they're seeing at smaller firms. We do our best before we get to an actual proposal to make sure we're thinking about the impact on smaller firms. But certainly we may not get it right. We may not think of everything or be aware of everything. So I really can't overstate the value of the feedback we receive from all stakeholders, but certainly smaller firms. And again, I recognize it can be a big lift at times, and we do our best to be cognizant of that. So
I think I've been remiss with providing some CPE codes, so I'm going to throw the next one out there. It's 653. 653. I'm going to propose one question that I'm sure individuals here who work with broker-dealers it's top of mind, so we might as well throw it out there. Absolutely. What's going on with the interim broker-dealer program? What are the plans on making that a permanent program?
That question also comes up quite frequently. As many of you know, to Ellen's point, the PCOB has been operating under, quote, an interim broker-dealer program. You'll hear about that more later this afternoon from some of our esteemed colleagues that focus on the BD space. The way the Dodd-Frank was essentially prepared would be that the board would perform inspections for a period of the interim program, and then after a period would take that learning and then come back with or propose a permanent broker-dealer program. The law wasn't prescriptive like it was in the issuer space where you have annual, triennial. The board has much more latitude and leeway what a permanent program may look like. And here we are, probably 10 years or so since we started the interim program, it's still an interim program. A couple things I would say to it. One is we believe very clearly, without qualification, that the interim program is working, that the inspections are occurring. We have our annual report that we produce on a non-firm specific basis that we think is quite useful to the ecosystem. We had a recent spotlight, I believe, on the BD space that we think was quite helpful as well. Personally, I would like to think we will move at some point to a permanent program. I think that needs to occur, but at the moment, when we look at all of our priorities, all of our focuses, things are working well right now and don't have any plans to change that in the near future. So I would, if I were in your shoes right now, assume kind of steady state, all things being equal relative to that. And obviously, just to state the obvious, that a permanent program would be rulemaking, so that's not something that would happen overnight. That will go through a formal review, a rulemaking process with comment, et cetera. So it'd be well known if and when the board starts that process.
And picking up the pace with the codes, I'm going to throw another one out. 223, code 223. So this next question comes from the audience, and it deals with something that I know you spend a lot of time thinking about, and it's the pipeline of individuals into this profession. So we have two professors here from Loyola Marymount University who know firsthand about how people coming into the business school aren't necessarily coming into the accounting programs. And the question is kind of related to audit quality and about how it's not just tone at the top, that you need qualified, trained people who are being mentored and provided with on-the-job training to instill quality throughout engagement teams who go through their careers within firms. And so it's harder to bring those people in. So the question is, what are your thoughts in terms of students' choice of professions, students selecting accounting as opposed to finance, and just what your thoughts are with respect to the pipeline, and maybe also adding on to the question, what is the PCOB doing to address this critical issue?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to that question, and this is probably a topic we could spend the rest of the day talking about, truth be told, because it's that deep of an issue. At least I believe it's that deep of an issue, and I think it's taken. I believe, and I welcome challenge and pushback to this and anything I've said. Truth be told, I think it's taken us a while to get here as a profession, and I don't think it's going to turn around by tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Unfortunately, I think it's going to take maybe years, but I think there's a couple things I would say, because I think there's a lot of pieces to this. So it's not one, unfortunately, it's not one silver bullet. You change one lever and things start to move. But I think fundamentally, I would say, before I mention a couple more specific things, I think it's a renewed emphasis and focus on the value of the audit and the value of accounting. That from two perspectives. One, and this is no disrespect to other disciplines, but when I was coming through the ranks, I had an accounting professor make a comment where he said, it was a he at that time, he said that accounting is a language of business, and accounting is a language of business. If you know accounting, you know business. And maybe I was a sucker, but that hooked me. And then as I went through other business classes, again, this is no disrespect to other disciplines, but if one wants to go into marketing down the road or even go into finance down the road, we actually had breakfast with an individual, Elle and I did before this meeting, where an individual actually was saying that he started in accounting and now he's doing things well in finance, investing, and all of that, but it's grounded in his experience as being an accountant and an auditor. And so I think that the value proposition of being an auditor and accounting really needs a re-energized emphasis, not just by the academic community, not just by the firms, I think by the whole ecosystem. I think it starts there. The other thing I would say beyond that, just in interest of time quickly, what comes up very quickly is pay and compensation. And in a number of cases, and we've had a lot of conversations with academics over the last 6 or 7 months or so around the country, big colleges, smaller colleges, et cetera. And when you get into this topic always comes up pretty quick. And you say, well, what do you think? And they'll say, well, it's compensation. That the 10 years or so ago, students coming out of business colleges, accounting was the highest paid area. Now it's lowest paid area. One person said the number hasn't moved. This is a direct quote, hasn't moved in 10 years. And this is a retired partner that now is a professor, and said, well, what did the firms think was going to happen? If you didn't change, it's already paying in 10 years. Now, we can debate the pros and cons of all these pieces, but that always lands on the other issue that comes up pretty quickly is the career model, and maybe that today's students aren't as willing to accept maybe what I was accepting, a lifetime ago, that the partner track is 12, 15 years. I'm not going to wait that long. So what does that mean? That one to me is a little more complicated. What does that mean in the apprenticeship model? So I think there's a number of pieces. So, what are we doing? I'll wrap this up quickly. We're talking to not just Ellen and I, but other board members are talking with a lot of accounting students. I've had the wonderful opportunity to talk to 5 groups this year, 3 on campus and 2 at our offices, about the value of the audit, the capital markets. I hope that's helpful. Now, those are already students, so hopefully they stay. That's not bringing in new people. But I think it's a lot of that, and I would just end with, as I mentioned in the prepared remarks, we do believe that our scholarship does help. We've talked to students that received the scholarship. Some wonderful, stories about folks that really needed that money, and it made a difference. So not to say that we're saving the world here, but little things do matter in this space. So that's another way we're trying to help with it. But it is something I think it takes all of us to be thinking about and working on to move that needle.
We started a little late, and so I'm going to run over, but not too much over, because I want to be respectful of time. But I want to be able to, pose some more questions to you. And also, if anyone has anything else in the audience, you can shoot that through, and George will be back up at the end of the day. So I guess in the interest of time, I'll say 2 issues that you alluded to in your remarks, and I'll let you choose which one you address. And then if people are interested in the other, we can come back to it. But you mentioned in your remarks AI and PE investments in firms. And I know that's something that when you're having meetings with stakeholders come up a lot as issues. So is there, I'm interested in your thoughts on both of those, but in the interest of time, I'll let you choose just one.
Yeah, I'll mention PE. I'll do it quick, and happy to talk further about either. In private equity, it's been around. It's getting more press now, but it's been out there for a few years, at least a few years, and maybe more than that. At maybe some smaller firms, with the Grant Thornton announcement, it's gotten a lot more press, and then Baker Tilly had an announcement earlier this year. It is something that we were, as Ellen said, we've been talking about, thinking about. Even when I was in DRI, my prior life, it was something that we were talking to firms about, trying to understand, where it's coming from, kind of where it's going. So right now, we are still trying to understand, I would say, where it's going. And to be very clear, within the PCUB's remit, the structure of the firm, we don't have views over the structure of the firm. On the alternative practice structure, good or bad, we're not looking at it from that perspective. We are looking at it, though, from audit quality. We are looking at it from independence and other drivers around kind of those 2 pillars, if you will, and thinking through what does this mean for the profession longer term. If all of a sudden this continues to grow, if it does, that's fine. What does that mean, and how do we think about that? And how do firms think about that from going back to another point quickly, is firm culture. Because you're taking an entity and an accounting firm, an audit firm that does have a public interest focus, as the profession does. It's a viable commercial enterprise as well, make no mistake. But then you bring a private equity investment in. There is, I think, would have to be some tension with those 2. And what does that mean for quality of the audit on a longer term basis? So those are some, I'll pause there, some of the things that we're thinking about. And AI, in one sentence, we are very focused on AI. You'll probably hear more about that from standard setting, but it's something, and others may touch on it, but it's something I know kind of all of our activities are focused on: AI and advanced technology and machine learning, robotics, and what does that mean for the audit going forward as well. So all top of mind issues.
I'm not certain if I gave the 4th code, so if I did, forgive me, but I think I didn't. 227, so 227. Looks like I didn't send it, so thank you. So, George, I'll let you introduce the next panel. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing your perspectives.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen, very much as well. And as Ellen mentioned, there will be time at the end of the day, so please submit your questions, and we'll get those later if we can. The next session, I'm going to hand off to my colleagues in the Division of Registration and Inspection, Jack Griffith and Vic Rodriguez, 2 very senior and very experienced inspectors. So they'll provide you a wealth of information. And they're coming up right now. So with that, we'll hand it off, and we'll do our best to keep things as close to on track as we can. Thank you all again very much.